Hey everybody, welcome in. How's it going? Hope you've been doing well. I was gonna say hope you had a great weekend, but it is the middle of the week. We're going into a Thursday, and I wanted to pop this out really quick. I've been away, well, not away, but just away from recording for a little bit. Down on wrestling a little bit at the moment, not AEW. I'll say it again, but we're gonna get back to that over the weekend, maybe even next week. A lot to talk about. But this week, as you can see from the icon that you clicked on, we're going to be talking about Superman. Now, again, this is not a movie podcast, but I will talk about movies every once in a while, and it also gives me a creative break from kind of talking about wrestling nonstop. And people seem to like the last one I did, which was Clown in a Cornfield. So I'm going to talk about Superman now. Uh, this seems like an obvious one to do because obviously it's very new, and aside from probably the Fantastic Four, one of the more talked about movies thus far for the summer that's coming out from a comic book standpoint. Um, but I happened to have an opportunity to watch this over the weekend, or actually yesterday. So I wanted to talk about it because I actually, I'll give you my take on it at the end. I'll go through the plot. But before we even get into it, silly to say this, but this is a review of the movie. So there will be spoilers. We'll talk about the general story, give you a rundown. So if this is something that you're not interested in hearing about right away, come back to it. Go watch the movie and then let me know your thoughts as well. While I got you here, let me just say we are obviously on YouTube at Wrestling with Emotions. Please go ahead, like, subscribe. I have 3 subscribers. I'm probably one of them. And the other one is a family member. I know that for sure. So if you can subscribe online, I would be very appreciative. So let's get into this first. Now, I will say this before we even get in, because if I ever talk about any other comic book movies again, I want to say that for a while there, much like the rest of the world, I was riding high on comic book movies. To give you a little bit of a background, I peaked from a probably a mental standpoint too in what, like, fifth grade. I think fifth grade was the height of when I started to really get into comics and comic related related things. I had a couple of comics as a kid. I remember I had an issue with the Black Suit Spider-Man, which I thought was really cool looking. And I always did like Batman as a young kid. I remember I had like these little pocket books um, that would be like, you could fit them in your, obviously you could fit them in your pocket, but they would be tons and tons of stories. So I grew up, obviously I was a very much a Batman fan. And then when I hit fifth grade, I want to say, I was introduced like all these trading cards. And if you're of a certain age, you will remember this. The 90s to me were the golden age of trading cards. No matter what the property was, forget comics. If it had any type of intellectual property attached to it, you they would make trading cards of it. Um, Movies, every movie that came out, Adam's Family. I just trying to think of about some of the ones I have. The Beetlejuice cartoon, Pee Wee Herman, um, cards of everything. American Gladiators, Desert, yeah, Operation Desert Storm, war trading cards were all available. But in that peak era right there was all these comic cards. So I started to see and learn about all these different characters. My brother fell in love with it probably even, well, not I can't even say probably, way more intensely, I would say, than I did. I appreciated stories and certain things like that, but I was more so in love with certain artists and how they drew and how they depicted certain characters. So I was really, I was drawn to like Jim Lee's style of art. I think a lot of people were at that particular time, obviously, and this is when the X-Men series starts to kind of reboot in the early 90s. They make a ton of money off of that. Then the cartoon comes out, etc., etc. So I was very much big into comics. So at the time, they used to have these comics, or these magazines that would talk about comics and upcoming things, called Wizard Magazine. Now if you are of an age, you will remember these as well. But Wizard Magazine used to have these features in it where they would cast movies, because at the time there were no comic book related movies, and if they were, a comic book related movie, like a lot of times you didn't really know about it. I mean, you obviously knew like Dick Tracy was a comic book movie, Batman '89 was a comic book movie. Trying to think about what else may have come in. Obviously, the Batman series at that particular time, but Marvel in that moment was relatively obscure, or if it was something, it was like very low budget and went to DVD. I think there's an early Fantastic Four cut of something that's out there that looked just pretty rough. I'm probably missing some movies as well because I know Fantastic Four in the early '90s with like Jessica Alba. It might have been late '90s, and then of course Spider-Man starts to pick up with Sony, and a few years later in the early 2000s. But either way, they used to have these articles where they would cast hypothetical castings of movies and things like that. So that was always like very cool because you would look at it and say, "Oh, they're casting the X-Men movie," and then they finally did make the X-Men movie. And I think maybe Patrick Stewart was cast as Professor X in the book, the magazine, and then eventually in the thing. But it wasn't until obviously the Marvel movie started to really get into gear with like Iron Man that from a visual standpoint, it was able to match your imagination, I guess. But like everything, there is a period of burnout. So I did stop watching after Endgame. I watched, that's like a 10-year period alone to get to that movie. But I watched WandaVision, and these are of course Marvel movies. But and then I kind of fell off. And in between, I would watch the DC movies. So I really loved obviously Christopher Nolan's Batman series. I was never a DC comic guy except for Batman. But I never really got into the other characters. I loved the art style and the cool characters within Marvel, and I love the fact that they were grounded within a sense of not. This is going to sound stupid, but a sense of reality in the fact that Spider-Man's from New York, right? Um, all these people were from cities that were recognizable, so they were icons within iconic places, so they were associated naturally with those locations. Batman is from Gotham City. Superman is from Metropolis. There's all these other elements in like made up cities. So the fact that there was a realism to that, I think, intrigued me a little bit more as well. But with that said, I did like to start to look at and watch the DC extended universe. So it started, of course, with Man of Steel in 2013. So I never watched any of the like the CW DC shows. My brother, again, like love those properties, Green Arrow, all those. I watched the Flash show as a kid. I forget what his name is, but I remember my mom helping me make the costume as a kid. It was the very first Flash show where he's like jacked Flash. I forget his name, the actor, but either way, I thought that was a cool series. But that was probably like the only TV. I think we maybe watched Lois and Clark with Terry Hatcher, um, but not religiously. And the CW shows always have a look and a feel to me that's very, and no disrespect, but very cheesy looking. So I've always associated with that, kind of like the films. But I've always, anytime a property from or a new movie comes out, for the most part, like The Man of Steel in 2013, starring Henry Cavill, set the stage, for that franchise. And I thought he was good. I liked that movie. I liked the darker tone of it. Um, there were some things I think that were flawed, but overall, I thought it was a really cool movie, and I loved seeing like the Superman like traveling from town to town and things along those lines. But here you have a totally new story, a totally new director, a totally new vision, and it's you've seen the trailer, so obviously you already know. And if you were listening, maybe you've already probably even seen the movie, but it's very bright, so it does kind of give a very glossy, almost CW feel, but ramped, super ramped up quality. I would say it does look great. Um, so this time around, we're full steam ahead into James Gunn's universe. So it's written, directed by James Gunn. And you can read all the behind the scenes and stuff like that in terms of like the costume and the casting and stuff like that. But I will say overall, I thought the cast was pretty awesome. I think everybody was really well cast. You have David Corn Sweat, yeah, as Superman. Rachel Brosnahan, if I'm saying her name right, as Lois Lane, and Nicholas Holt. We'll just stop at those three as Lex Luthor. Nicholas Holt, of course, is no stranger to anybody that's watched comic book movies, and he's been in a lot of stuff as well. He's a very good actor. Um, but I thought they cast this movie really well. So right away, we get a different start and a different take. This is not an origin story for once, which is great, because I definitely don't think we needed one of those. The movie already breaks basically mid-fight in a sense, where we see we get a little bit of an introduction to the fact that Superman has recently stopped a nation called Baravia from invading a neighboring country, Jerhanapar. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And he warns the Baravian president to leave Jerhanapar alone. Um, we meet Superman as he's beaten in the snow. It's the opening part of the trailer as well. He's defeated for the first time by what they call a metahuman called the Hammer of Baravia. And he flees to the Fortress of Solitude in Antarctica. And right away, we're introduced to Krypto, which this is not the first time you're going to hear that if you listen to any of the reviews, and you've obviously seen him in the trailer. The absolute showstopper, stealer of any scene that he's in. The dog, I mean, this could have been a Krypto movie with an appearance by Superman, and I would have been stoked. If they do a Krypto movie, I'm all in. I mean, I loved the character. He was such like a pain. He wasn't like a the cool part that I liked about it was like he was not like a really, you would think like a superhero dog, right? Would be more intuitive, right? He's not well behaved. He destroys everything, which is to an advantage in certain parts of the movie. But I thought he was hilarious, and I think they did a really great job. Um, he's followed by this character called the Engineer. Now, some of these characters, I will be honest with you, as we start to go through them, um, I'm not very familiar with in the comics. Like I never really read DC comics, like I said, outside of Batman and some probably basic Superman knowledge. So some of the stuff was new to me. So I think I'd only seen like a picture of Crypto, probably at certain points. But basically, Crypto takes him into the back to the Fortress of Solitude so he can heal. Um, and during that particular time, we're introduced now to the Superman robots. And I believe these are from the comic books. But basically, they use concentrated solar radiation to help heal Superman. And at the same time, they always play like a message from his birth parents, Jor-El and Laura Lorvan, who sent him to Earth. Now, part of this message notoriously has been erased or damaged actually from when the ship crashed, so he's only ever heard like a certain piece of it, and a lot of it is very encouraging, positive, like showing the people of Earth, and leading them, blah 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 blah, very positive um message, and it gets him going. So once he's healed up, he returns. He is again beaten by the Hammer, who we later will find out is secretly was secretly made by Lex Luthor. So when you're watching this, the fight scene that they have very early on, Lex is calling it. He's calling all of the metahuman, I guess, the Hammer, all of his physical moves. So if he is so well studied on Superman's movements, his fighting style, etc. They have like these floating orbs that are essentially cameras, and he's calling the action, and they defeat him again. Um, he I guess the Hammer leaves at that particular point to go to a military encampment that's basically on the other side of Metropolis, on the other side of the river. It looks like, so it's super close. Um, and then you see the Hammer go through. He flies out, exits, and then he goes through um What we would then be know. So basically, he goes to the military camp, and they go through these portals that Lex Luthor has built. These like rifts in time that allows them basically to move from one location to another. Um, so there's a tower, Lex's tower, the thing is able to beam in there. Either way, long story short, at that particular point, we're also introduced to. We are soon going to be introduced to more heroes, um, but so basically, we start out with action right away. We see Superman beat, bleeding, and I think this is kind of the first. This is the first indication in this movie, like this is going to be a different take on Superman. And I think one of my criticisms and my lack of interest, I guess overall in the character as a kid, was he seemed obviously indestructible, right? Nothing can hurt him. I mean, that kryptonite and stuff like that, of course. But with that said, um, you don't really see a lot of vulnerability from a physical nature usually. So the fact that he's already been beaten up and it looks like he's losing every single fight that he's in, or he needs help in fights to win. So it's a much different approach and take. Um, where next we go to and meet up in the Daily Planet, um, and then you can. I think you find out very quickly at that Clark comes in. You got Jimmy there, Jimmy Olsen, Lois, some other characters, and then Lois goes home for the night, and then Clark is cooking her dinner. And she knows he's Superman, so they've been dating for a little while. It's clear that they know that. He agrees to be interviewed by her. You've seen this all in the trailer as well. It gets a little heated back and forth from some of the questioning. He obviously takes things in terms from the stance of always like doing the right thing, saving people's lives, and not being bound to any particular country or protocol, I guess would be the best way to say it. Um, let's see here. From this particular point, they have. Oh, by the way, so we go back, as I mentioned, the engineer sees the Fortress of Solitude to create a distraction so they can get in there. While they are exploring the Fortress of Solitude, they unleash a kaiju into Metropolis, and it continues to grow, gigantic. And this is where we meet up with the Justice Gang, which obviously will in the future become part of the Justice League. It's a team composed of Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, who I was never familiar with, and Hawk Girl, who I've only seen in pictures. They help defeat the creature by killing it. And now we're introduced to this new team that will help him at a number of different times throughout the course of the movie. During this particular time, as I mentioned, Lex and his team breaks into the Fortress of Solitude. They kill all the robots apparently, and then they also steal the message from his family. But the engineer is able to fix whatever broke in the crash, and she's able to engineer the rest of that message. So quickly after the fight with the kaiju, it's already broadcast out loud to the world the full message, which is verified multiple times, and they say it multiple times that it is actually real. That essentially his parents sent him to Earth not just to help it, but to also rule over rule over the people of Earth, take on multiple wives, and essentially create a new what is Krypton, um, to restore the Kryptonian race. Public opinion, obviously, or the people turn on him extremely fast. I'm using some Wikipedia highlights here too, just citing that. Turns into an angry mob. Lex Luthor they also take Crypto out of the fortress there. Let's see here. Superman tells Lois he loves her, and then he turns himself in to the U.S. government. They hand him over to Lex Luthor for detainment. And this is where they take him there. So the rifts in time, or those portals, are what they call pocket universes. Um, so he takes him to a pocket universe where essentially he's holding prisoner all these other people, to include like an ex girlfriend who like wrote a mean blog about him or something, um, and he puts him in a cell with this other character, um, that essentially can. It's called. His name is Metamorpho. He can essentially take on and create different pieces of matter, or things along those lines. So basically, he's in there because he can create kryptonite out of his body, rendering Superman, obviously, Superman super powerless. So while he questions him, um, there's a lot of actual murders in here as well. So at one particular point, while Superman's questioning him, I'm sorry, while Lex Luthor is questioning him, Lex Luthor is questioning Superman. There was a vendor, like a hot dog vendor, who helped pull him out of a hole, Superman out of a hole in Metropolis during one of the fights. They identify this guy, they bring him to this pocket universe, and he plays Russian roulette only twice, and then ends up killing the guy. Um, and he's going to leave, and then he says, "Well, maybe the next person that I bring in here will be that reporter that always talks to. Maybe I'll bring in Clark Kent or Lois Lane." Um, so at this particular point, Superman is basically imprisoned in this pocket universe. Um, Lex has killed this dude, and then Lois is out with the Super Gang, the Justice Gang, convincing Mr. Terrific and the rest of the folks, the Hawk Girl and Green Lantern, to help save Superman, and to help them in this to help find him. Mr. Terrific, obviously, he will be the one who will help Lois. They fly a spacecraft over. They retrace the steps because apparently they've implanted like trackers essentially in Superman's blood, and he can find the last place that he went. Meanwhile, Jimmy Olsen, the Daily Planet photographer, is getting information fed to him by Lex Luthor's girlfriend, Eve Tessmacher. Now, I haven't, like I said, I haven't read the books. Was Jimmy Olsen like a stud or something in these comic books? Because he's got all these ladies after him, and it sounds like it's a thing. Um, but I don't remember that as part of the books. But all these ladies are out for Jimmy Olsen, and this gal is shooting information his way, texts. So she ends up sending him a series of selfies she was taking selfies throughout the fight, throughout everything that goes on in Luthor Tower and Lex Tower, whatever it's called. And eventually, basically, it shares and shows all this information, basically, that helps kind of uncover like the secret plan and plot behind of like why all this was happening. Um, the setup for Baravia, all those the war, the selling of arms, different things along those lines. Now, while all this is happening, you have um, within the Pocket Universe that Mr. Terrific gets in there to help save and pull out Superman, Crypto, Metamorpho. After seeing Lex Luthor kill that guy in cold blood, basically um, mutates his body into something similar to like a sunfire or sunburst to try to energize Superman in some way. It does enough to kind of get him going so they can at least escape. So he gets out of there with Crypto, Metamorpho's child, who is across the way. And the whole reason why he's doing this basically is like his son, his little baby, is also being held captive. So he's actually a good person, or good whatever. But either way, so they escape, they get out of there, and here we go. So now, let's see here. Where are we? So now we go to Kansas so that Superman can rest. So we meet um, Jonathan and Martha Kent, um, which I thought were also cast really well. Usually, I mean, consider that Kevin Costner was his dad in the last iteration. Having a regular average Kansas couple, I thought was like the perfect direction to go in. Um, so really well done, and Kevin Costner's wife was one of the hot. Who is that? What is her name? I can't remember her name, but another a super attractive lady, and not that anybody in Kansas is not, but I thought it was really cool to kind of see like some down to earth folks for once. So let's see here. So as all this is going on, so now they've pulled him out of there. Um, what they do now is they're intensifying the conflict in Baravia as well at the border with Jardapur, um, and pushing to war to try to push Superman out into the open. And in the meantime, um, they open up another portal or pocket dimension that starts to create another. The more you open these up, the more it creates a black hole essentially, and that rift starts to tear and go towards Metropolis. So he has to make a choice. So during this time, he defeats the engineer, learns that the Hammer of Baravia, or I guess as they call him, Ultraman, is a clone of himself. Essentially, Lex Luthor was able to obtain like a piece of his hair, create this clone of Superman, which is how he was able to get into the Fortress of Solitude to begin with, which is DNA encrypted. Um, and long story short, the Justice Gang and everybody helps come together to save the day. They expose the fact that Lex Luthor essentially started this war in order to basically just flush Superman out, frame him for being like a problem, or um, you know, make him look like he was the reason that all these bad things were happening. Um, they clear Superman's name. Luthor and his associates are arrested, and they're trapped in that pocket universe, including and those sorry and those that were trapped in the pocket universe were freed. Then Lois finally tells Superman she loves him, or calls Clark she loves him as well. And then we go back to the Fortress of Solitude. The robots are back in action, and then we meet Supergirl, his cousin, pops in very quickly. Drunkenly arrives to pick up her dog, Crypto. And I guess, and I didn't know this either. I guess they can't get drunk on a planet with a yellow sun. It has to be another one, like a red sun. So she goes to other planets to get hammered. Now the robots in the Fortress of Solitude comfort him with footage of his Earth parents, and a lot of messages in terms of like you're not, your parents aren't the ones who make you into who you are. Essentially, like you make your own choices. So overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was a good movie, and I hope you love that stellar breakdown. Um, Things I liked. I mentioned Crypto. If I didn't mention Crypto, I'm going to mention him right now. I thought he was excellent. Um, Again, the casting all around stellar. I think everybody did a really great job. Um, and I thought, it was different that the more I thought about it too, because I was like, man, we're right in the middle of the action here. But I think, the more I thought about it and the more that I listened to some of the behind the scenes activity, it makes more sense why we went this direction. And at the same time, were there certain things that bothered me? So what could have bothered me before I listened to it was, hey, like I said, we're right in the middle of the action. So you have all this action right away, which is fine because he does a really good job, James Gunn, in slowing things down when he has, I think it was like a 7 to 10 minute interview with Lois and Superman in her apartment at a certain point. And I think that kind of helped ground things a little bit better. and set a tone of slowing things down because it's action, action, action. I thought there was a lot of humor in the movie as well, and that's going to be classic James Gunn. He's always going to throw things in there. Like I think there's a funny scene where Superman returns from somewhere and he goes to his apartment or hers. Maybe hers. Maybe his. He goes to a fucking apartment, okay? And outside the window, you can see the Justice Gang is fighting. It looked like Starro. I thought it was Starro, but it turns out it was an imp from another dimension. So you can see the Justice Gang is fighting. You can see Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and Mr. Terrific fighting this thing. And Lois is like, they're in the middle of a conversation, just talking casually while this is all happening. Like, this shit just happens all the time. Why would you live in Metropolis? Why would you live here when all of this shit is going on right outside your window? There was such a casualness to some of the people. Like, even in the beginning, someone was either working in a restaurant or eating in a restaurant while buildings are collapsing outside, and they were casually just like, they were fine with it. And then Lois is like, do you need to go help them? And he was like, he looks at it, he's like, oh no, they got it. They're fine. So I thought that was funny because that kind of blends in like, hey, this is like the world that they live in. This is like a normal occurrence, which again, why would you live in the city? Um, what bothered me? Huh. Um, I don't know. I think it was a little bit simple in terms of we're framing Superman. We're making another superhero look like they're the actual villain. Um, and you see it all the time. I mean, Jesus, you see it in all the Mission Impossible movies. Um, you see it in all these other movies. Like, hey, we got to clear this person's name. I mean, he wasn't necessarily worried about clearing his name, but all these other folks were. So there was a lot of plot points around that and kind of getting through that. Um, the Pocket Universe stuff was interesting. Um, it wasn't like there wasn't unless am too stupid to kind of pick up on it. There wasn't like a lot of messages. Like a lot of the Marvel movies tend to kind of like cram down your throat at a certain point, and that's when I also stopped watching. Um, I mean, there was a little bit of like Lois can do anything when she's flying that plane, but they kind of explain that as well, like how it's intuitive and easy for anybody to do it. Um, so I thought that was a good save there. Um, like I said, if this movie had way more crypto in it, I thought it'd be cool. I didn't mind the other tertiary characters. That's a big word, right? Right. Like again, introduced me to Mr. Terrific. I thought that guy looked really cool. Really cool look. I liked the Green Lantern. Hawkgirl was fine. I mean, she didn't. She was kind of inconsequential. She was just like it just like seemed like, hey, what other characters can we pull in here? So that was fine. Um, because usually what ends up happening with some of these movies, these ensemble movies, is it can be sometimes tough to follow and it can sometimes not be done very well. Like the very first Suicide Squad. But James Gunn has like a an eye for this type of stuff doing the ensemble comedies. Like for example, I had no what's the word? I had no reference for Guardians of the Galaxy until I saw the movie. But the cast and the music driving that, etc. I thought they did a really great job of highlighting, hey, who this is your main character. These are your supporting folks, and I think they did a really good job of like weaving everybody together. Same thing when he took over and did the second Suicide Squad movie. I thought that was a really good take on that as well. And he always has a way of like introducing the wild and the weird into a movie and making it normal, like Starro in the Suicide Squad. Who, number one, I never even knew who that was, but to see that on screen, it's like, what a choice! Like, this could have been any manner of, or any number of weird villains, right? But they chose that, and I thought that looked super cool. So overall, I did like this movie. I think I would probably watch it again just to kind of see if I missed anything, or didn't pick up on anything specific, because aside from not understanding why Jimmy Olsen is such a ladies' man, I was pretty much fine with the movie. I thought it looked good. I thought it was paced pretty fast as well. I think it's a run. Yeah, it's a little over 2 hours, but it felt like it went relatively fast. And I think part of that is probably the perception, since you're thrust right into the action right away. I thought it was an interesting take as well, to also make that message from his parents, like the real, be real, instead of like for what's the word, faked, I guess is the easiest simple way to say it. But I thought that was cool. So and again, I thought it was interesting too, like the take on, so I think when we meet Superman, I think maybe he's only been doing this from, like, he's only been exposed as Superman, or to the public, for maybe like 3 years. So he's still a very young Superman in his Supermandom. So you can see, like, from a fighting standpoint and from a power standpoint, like, he seems to kind of be still like getting a grasp on a lot of these different things. So again, you didn't see like the world beater that he's usually in some of these movies. And you didn't see so we didn't do anything in terms of like turning back time, like in the very first movie with Christopher Reeve, where he flies around the earth in a really fast opposite direction, and like turns back time. So none of that like goofy shit. Yeah, none of that goofy shit. Just real cool stuff like flying dogs and jokes. And I was very surprised by like the amount of people that actually were killed. So overall, I thought it was really good. I would recommend seeing it if you haven't. I think it's a really great way to kind of get things kickstarted for the new DC universe, or whatever they're going to call it. And I thought it was the right choice, I think, to kind of recast. I don't know. I'm sure there were directions that this could have gone. But here's what I'll say: keep going in this type of direction. The problem with like the Justice League movies, and after, which movie was it? After Superman, what's the first what, Superman Returns? Man of Steel. After Man of Steel, which also had a lot of obviously like heavy CGI, it still looked better than what they did in like Batman v Superman towards the end, the Justice League movies, anything with a backdrop in it looks terrible in those movies. You're watching a computer, basically. You're watching a video game. And that takes you out of it. And not to say like the Marvel movies don't have that, but there's like a different there's a different effect. And I don't know how to explain it. Like you'll see a Marvel movie, you'll know like the background is CGI, but it's way better done. It's way better. Like you can pick certain things apart and say like, oh well, this looks like shit. But these other movies, and this is one of the reasons that people poo-poo DC, is because it looks like a made-for-TV movie in some of these cases, and some of the CGI. Like, I mean, this is just how they botched the Superman mustache cover-up a couple of years ago when he was also filming Mission Impossible. But again, overall, I thought this was a good movie. I would see it again. I would recommend, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and see it. It's only been in the theater since July 11th, so you've still got some time, and it'll probably be on streaming relatively soon. But enjoy. I hope you like the review. Leave some comments down below. Again, like, subscribe, and have a great rest of the week. The wrestling with the most